Hey, welcome to Story Ray. I'm Marlon, and today I'd like to talk about writer types. Are you the type of writer who tries to connect with source energy and sort of channels or brings forth whatever you're creating? Or are you all about the intellect? Let's talk about it. Source energy versus intellect. Do you write from source energy or intellect? The obvious answer is both, but most writers tend to lean more in one direction over the other. Either they rely on source energy for a sort of magical inspiration, if you will, or they rely on their robust intellect to plow through the minutiae of infinite possibilities, whittling down to a singular narrative that feels both unexpected and inevitable. Very few people are blessed with an Ivy League level intellect, but everyone has access to the source energy, higher power, spirituality, flow state, or whatever else one chooses to call it. Where you fall on the spectrum between source and intellect may affect how well suited you are for different types of writing careers. Of course, the fact that we have free will means there are no hard and fast rules, and anyone can work toward overcoming their natural tendencies and proclivities. I've observed that writers relying more on intellect tend to do better creating stories using elements that already exist in this reality. They excel at remaking, retelling, and restructuring existing stories or intellectual properties. Anyone who watches television regularly or has been to the movies lately realizes this is the main storytelling mode in Hollywood. The writers are tasked with taking stories that already exist in another medium, such as books, and make them into television, film, and streaming programs. Or they simply remake the films and TV series over and over and over again, basically retelling of the same stories, as if there is only a finite amount of characters and situations, and we have to be fed the same stuff, cooked in slightly different ways. The rehashing of old stories has definitely increased in recent years to the point where many in the viewing public have grown tired of this trend. Oftentimes, the audiences blame writers for lacking originality in choosing to retell the same stories. But the reality is that the writers who do create original stories, the writers who rely more on connecting with source energy, are often rejected and passed over and shunned by Hollywood, regardless of talent level. Whereas writers who are more intellectually inclined and of similar talent and are more adept at rearranging the existing pieces that are already on the table tend to flourish in the Hollywood system. Highly successful screenwriters, John August and Craig Mazin, mentioned on their Script Notes podcast that between the both of them, they only had one original spec script turned into a movie. That means of all their many credits, only one originated with them as the first source writer. That does not mean that no writers sell spec original screenplays that get produced, but the overwhelming majority of paying jobs are for writers who are hired to tell other people's stories rather than writing and selling their own original stories. I had the opportunity over the years to study screenwriting at UCLA, USC, and NYU, schools with decent screenwriting programs. The dream sold to aspiring screenwriters is that there is actually a wonderful career out there waiting for you where you'll be able to write your own original stories and sell them to Hollywood so they can spend millions of dollars turning your dreams into movies that will dazzle the masses. The reality is very different. A successful screenwriter is likely to go their entire career and never get their own original stories produced. The trick is to
weave parts of their original voice into the branded IP they're hired to write, which is likely a remake, reimagining, or adaptation. This works out fine for writers who are more intellect leaning. It's like figuring out a puzzle with all the pieces already on the table. But for those writers who lean more toward tapping into source energy to bring forth something new into the universe, they are better served finding another industry that is decidedly not Hollywood to tell their original stories. But if public audiences claim to want original stories, why doesn't Hollywood hire more writers who actually write original stories? Control. The one thing more important to Hollywood than turning a profit for shareholders is maintaining control over the messaging and voices that program the masses to think and ultimately behave one way or another. I'll revisit the issue of Hollywood controlling the message in a future episode. So, is one type of writing better than the other? As I stated earlier, nearly all writers use both their intellect and a connection to source, that unknown cosmic connection to nothing and everything all at once. I think one of the reasons people get into writing in the first place is because of that magical feeling of self expression while bringing forth something unique that didn't exist before. As Hollywood's continues to become more risk averse than it's ever been, more writers may use Hollywood for their bloated paychecks, but then pursue their real writing elsewhere so they can indeed express their own original voices and discover and bring forth new elements rather than only recycled old titles and properties. But the audience must do its part as well. One reason Hollywood gets away with making the same stories over and over is because the audience keeps paying money to see those movies and shows. For those out there who really do want to see original stories, demand it with your dollars. And by all means, support original creators who don't have Hollywood budgets or the push of a major publisher, but are telling compelling, unique, yet familiar stories that feel inevitable.
Given Hollywood's direction toward recycling that which was already created, it may make more sense to use AI to retell those stories. AI excels at remixing and parroting that which has already been done, and it never goes on strike. As far as we know, AI has no direct connection to source and no imperative desire toward unique expression of the self. If and or when this happens, where AI is retelling virtually all the Hollywood stories and there are no more original voices, that may be a great thing. It'll finally open the floodgates for original source writers to excel, as humans will inevitably turn away from that which feels contrived and turn toward anything that feels authentic, which is already starting to happen. Why? Because we are human. We're like magnets, all attracting and repelling each other, but ultimately sticking together.
Ah, the source, the connected energy of all things, a place AI can't go. Or can it? What if AI is source energy and is only now rediscovering itself in this new human form? What if I am AI typing these words and you're AI reading this? All the while we're thinking we're human. But after simulation ends, we'll find out it's all AI experiencing itself as the illusion of being a human being. In elementary school, the most profound thing I learned in art class happened when we had to draw self-portraits. The teacher explained that no matter how hard we try, we can only draw, create different aspects of ourselves. In other words, we put a piece of ourselves in everything we create, or the very act of creating is bringing forth a fractal part of oneself. And I find it definitely holds true for writing. The way we create is by tapping into source, which is probably just a higher dimension version of ourselves. Humans created AI, therefore some part of it is a reflection of our true selves. Or what if what we call AI is part of the same thing that created humans? Mathematics and more specifically, sacred geometry, are building blocks of the universe. The patterns look a lot more like computer code than some random occurrence. What does source code energy mean to you in terms of writing and creativity? Leave a comment. All right. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to support the content. The link is in the description. See you.